Is Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for being with us. Let's talk first about Boko Haram. Is this really a publicity stunt by them? Is it a publicity stunt to help ISIS? Is this propaganda? Because they're not really going to be operationally engaged, are they?
Well, I think in part, absolutely, it's a propaganda boost. I think for both of them, assuming this video proves to be accurate, and I have no reason to doubt that it will, Boko Haram is under a lot of pressure. There are 4 African nations and militaries now joining forces against it from Nigeria, Niger, Cameroon, and Chad. So it's facing a lot of external pressure. ISIS, similarly, in Syria and Iraq, particularly now in Iraq, facing a lot of pressure into Tikrit by the Kurds, by forces in Syria as well. So both are under extreme pressure from within and from without. So this holds a propaganda boost for both. I'm not sure we'll see great command and control of Boko Haram by ISIS, but we will see, I think, additional recruiting by Boko Haram as a result of this, and maybe see additional financing as well. So there's certainly something to be had for both organizations, but it also, I think, shows that both organizations are under increasing pressure.
Now, we see Iran and Iran-sponsored militias really coming to the support of the Iraqi armed forces in Tikrit. Isn't this sort of a mixed blessing? There is real concern that Iran is gaining influence in Iraq.
Well, it is, and hard to even say a mixed blessing, because to the degree that it means increasing Iranian influence over Iraq, that's a bad thing. To the degree that it means that this may become even greater sectarian conflict if, for example, those Shia militias go into Tikrit, they ethnically cleanse areas, or they bring about reprisal killings of Sunnis. We're never going to peel these Sunni communities away from ISIS. So all of that is bad. It would be far better if these militias or their members were incorporated into Iraqi forces and didn't fight as militias. But we don't have that much control over this. We need to use what leverage we have in terms of the provision of our military support, because if this becomes a sectarian bloodbath in Tikrit or Mosul, it will tremendously set back the cause of defeating ISIS.
Congressman, I want to also ask you about Iran, because in the Senate, 47 senators have now written a letter to Iran saying that they will not consider any agreement on the nuclear program that John Kerry and the President negotiate with the allies as binding on them. This is an unprecedented gesture, it seems to me, maybe more than a gesture, at undercutting an executive function, which is the negotiating of these agreements.
Andrea, I can't tell you how appalled I am at this letter. I think it's irresponsible to have these GOP senators write to a foreign government in a way that's at odds with the president's policy is beyond disturbing. We're so far beyond politics ending at the water's edge, and on an issue of this seminal importance, while sensitive negotiations are going forward, for these senators to interfere in this way, it's really unthinkable. And it just shows how the political process has degenerated that these senators would take such a step.
At the same time, we have a new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll that we're releasing just now, which says that 71% of those questioned do not think such an agreement would make a difference at controlling Iran from producing a nuclear weapon. Only 24% said it would stop Iran from getting a weapon. Does that lack of public support for an agreement, as it's been described so far, concern you?
Well, first of all, we don't have an agreement yet, so I think we all ought to keep our powder dry to see whether we get one and what that agreement might look like. But I've seen, Andrea, a variety of polls that are all over the map depending on how you ask the question. If you ask Americans whether they would prefer a negotiated outcome, they'll say yes. If you ask them whether they have confidence this will prevent Iran from gaining the bomb one day, many may say no. The answer is that there are no great options here. There are a lot of problems that have been identified potentially with this negotiation, and I understand the concerns very well. At the same time, if this falls apart, it may not be very realistic to think that additional sanctions are going to bring Iran back to the table and willing to give up their entire nuclear program. That doesn't seem very plausible either. So we're going to face some tough choices ahead, but I think all of us, Democrats and Republicans, House members and senators, ought to keep our powder dry until we see whether there's an agreement, and then there'll be plenty of time for us to weigh in.
You're a Democratic member of that House Select Committee. Benghazi. This is what the chairman of that committee, Congressman Gowdy, had to say to Bob Schiff this weekend on what he claims are real gaps in the emails that have been turned over.
Are there any gaps in the emails you have received so far from her?
Yes, sir. There are gaps of months and months and months. And if you think to that iconic picture of her on a C-17 flying to Libya, she has sunglasses on and she has her handheld device in her hand. We have no emails from that day. In fact, we have no emails from that trip.
What about those supposed gaps?
Want to leak information about the investigation. He's doing a pretty good job leaking it on national TV. I think the best way, Andrea, for the public to get a sense of what's in those emails is to release them. And if the chairman is as confident as that, he should release them. But the chairman has reviewed them, as I have and the committee members have. There's nothing indicating any support for the theories that a lot of the GOP members have been advancing about stand-down orders, about interference in security, about the secretary's alleged personal role in the security in Benghazi. So let's release the emails. Let the public look at them. But the chairman isn't willing to do that. Instead, he's willing to make selective comments on national TV. And I'm afraid that this committee is really becoming a surrogate of the Republican National Committee. And that's not something that a taxpayer-funded investigative committee has any business doing.
But, Congressman, shouldn't, as Dianne Feinstein has said, Hillary Clinton at least address this and explain why she set up a private email system in the first place?
You know, I'm sure at an appropriate time the Secretary will address this, and I think Jeb Bush will have to address why he set up a private server. But this is presidential politics, and my role, frankly, as a member of the Select Committee, is to keep the committee out of that process. And until this week, I think we had done a reasonable job. But now, with this article in the New York Times, the committee members, the GOP members, have decided it's time to politicize this because, Andrea, the chairman, the Republican members, we all knew the secretary had personal email accounts set up and was using this back last summer. So why now? And the answer is because I think the pressure simply got too great on the GOP members to resist issuing subpoenas and grandstanding about this. But it's a real dark turn of events for our committee.
Adam Schiff, Congressman, thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks, Andrea.
In South Korea.